The unbreakable ones. The Galactic Confederation spanned 12,000 species across 37,000 worlds. Its citizens ranged from crystalline hive intelligences to gaseous beings that communicated through pheromone bursts. Despite this incredible diversity, one classification system remained universal: the Habitability Index. This scale measured planetary conditions against a median standard, categorizing worlds from Paradise class, perfectly hospitable, to Death class, actively trying to murder its inhabitants. Most spacefaring species evolved on worlds within the 3 to 5 range. A few hardy outliers came from Class 6 planets. Humans came from Earth, Class 9.8. In galactic society, humans were living contradictions. Their world's brutal gravity, lethal radiations, extreme temperature variations, and predatory ecosystem should have created either extinct victims or monstrous killers. Instead, it produced poets, scientists, diplomats who simultaneously flinched at minor injuries, yet somehow survived conditions that would liquefy most species. Captain Naslakari stared at the application hovering in her data field. Her third eye twitched, a sign of extreme stress among Duraxians. She needed a new operations specialist for her mid-range cargo hauler, the Distant Current. The human applicant's qualifications were exceptional, but "You can't seriously be considering this," chittered her first officer, Cetal, antenna vibrating anxiously. "A human aboard our ship. They're walking disasters. They're also increasingly in demand," Naslakari replied, her scaled skin flushing deep purple with frustration. The Shipping Guild reports vessels with human crew members have 32% fewer catastrophic failures, because they cause so many minor disasters that the major ones never get a chance to develop, Cetal protested. The captain's pincer tapped thoughtfully against her command console. Their last operations specialist had resigned after a pirate encounter left him traumatized. They needed someone resilient. "Decision made," she announced. "We're taking the human." 2 cycles later, operations specialist Maya Chen boarded the Distant Current. She stood 1.7 meters tall, small for her species, with dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. Her exosuit was modified with unnecessary pockets and completely lacked the standard reinforced carapace that most species considered essential for space travel. "Permission to come aboard?" she asked with that peculiar human expression that exposed calcium deposits in their mouths. The crew's translator rendered it as friendliness display, rather than the threat gesture most species would interpret. "Granted," Naslakari said formally. "Welcome to the Distant Current. Your quarters have been modified to support your environmental needs." The human saluted, another gesture that made several crew members instinctively shield their vulnerable spots. "Thank you, Captain. I'm looking forward to working with everyone." The first 2 standard weeks passed without incident, which only increased the crew's anxiety. Humans were unpredictable. The waiting was unbearable. It happened during a routine cargo transfer at Outpost Zeta 9. Maya was coordinating the loading sequence when a power surge triggered a catastrophic failure in a cargo lifter. 3 tons of industrial components broke free, swinging wildly above the loading bay. The Talaxian dock worker froze directly in the impact path. The entire crew watched in horror, their reflexes too slow, the distance too great. Maya moved like liquid. She sprinted across the bay, leaped, and shoved the Talaxian clear, just as the cargo crashed down. The sickening crunch echoed through the bay. Cetal keened the death mourning of his people. Captain Naslakari felt her heart stink. Then the cargo shifted, rising. Maya stood beneath it, legs braced, shoulders hunched, the entire weight supported across her back. Her face was contorted, skin leaking from multiple lacerations, but she held. "Little help here," she grunted through clenched teeth. The crew snapped from their stupor. Emergency braces were deployed. The cargo secured. When Maya finally stepped away, she immediately collapsed. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Kelvinix, worked frantically over her prone body. 17 bone fractures, he reported incredulously. Massive soft tissue damage. Internal bleeding. By all logic, she should be dead. Will she survive? The captain asked. Dr. Kelvinix waved his sensory appendages in confusion. She's already healing. I don't understand how, but her body is fixing itself rapidly. 3 days later, Maya returned to light duty, her body wrapped in regenerative bandages. The crew stared at her with a new emotion, awe tinged with terror. You should have died, Cetal stated bluntly during the communal meal period. Maya shrugged, then winced at the motion. Earth gravity is 1.6 times stronger than standard Confederation norm. We're built tougher than we look. But the pain, persisted Neri, the young Floetian navigator. How did you endure it? Pain is just information, Maya replied, taking a bite of her nutrient pack. Sometimes you need to ignore the information until the crisis is handled. Later that night, Captain Naslakari reviewed the medical scans. Humans had evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them, developing redundant systems, remarkable cellular regeneration, and inexplicable endurance. Their bones knitted back together instead of requiring replacement. Their skin closed over wounds. They could lose significant blood volume and still function. They're not just survivors, she murmured to herself. They're the unbreakable ones. Word spread quickly. The distant Currents human crew member had survived what would have been fatal to any other species. More importantly, she had risked that remarkable durability to save another. At their next port, 3 captain owners approached Naslakari with offers to purchase Maya's contract at double standard rates. She declined. She's not equipment to be traded, the captain told her first officer. Extel's antennae twitched with amusement. 2 cycles ago, you wouldn't have wanted her aboard. Now you're protective. I'm pragmatic, Naslakari corrected. Maya is an asset, but there's something else we're missing. The Shipping Guild statistics show more than just survival improvements for ships with human crew. As if to prove her point, their next cargo run, transporting sensitive agricultural specimens, faced an unexpected complication. The atmospheric regulations failed in Hold 3, threatening 50 million credits of rare seedlings. The engineering team scrambled to restore systems, while Maya studied the rapidly deteriorating situation. The seedlings need controlled humidity and temperature, right? She asked. Yes, confirmed the cargo master. Without it, they'll be worthless in 20 minutes. Maya nodded, then tapped her comlink. Captain, I need emergency authorization to access the water reserves and the kitchen. Explain, Naslakari demanded. No time. Trust me. 4 anxiety-filled minutes later, the command staff watched in disbelief as Maya orchestrated a bizarre solution involving kitchen steam units, manual water distribution, and crew members from heat-resistant species, forming a living chain to maintain precise environmental conditions. The cargo was saved. That was unorthodox, Naslakari observed afterward. Maya grinned. Humans call it jury rigging. When proper tools aren't available, you use whatever's at hand. Your species' ability to improvise is remarkable, the captain acknowledged. It's how we survived Earth, Maya explained. Our world never gave us ideal conditions, so we learned to work with what we had. When your baseline experience is everything is trying to kill you, you get creative. And that, Naslakari realized, was the missing piece. Humans weren't just physically resilient. Their minds were equally adaptable, forged in the crucible of a death world, to see possibilities where others saw only disaster. Every space captain feared having a human aboard because they were unpredictable, accident-prone, and operated with terrifying disregard for proper protocols. And every space captain wanted a human aboard for exactly the same reasons. The crisis point. The distant current cruised through the glittering nebula of the Perseus Arm, its cargo holds filled with medical supplies bound for the outlying colonies. 6 standard months had passed since Maya Chen had joined the crew, and a peculiar equilibrium had developed. The crew had ceased flinching whenever she moved suddenly, though they still watched with fascination when she consumed foods that would dissolve most species' digestive tracts. "Status report," Captain Naslakari inquired as she entered the command deck. "All systems nominal," Maya responded, her fingers dancing across the operations console. "We're ahead of schedule by approximately 13 hours. Extel chittered appreciatively. "The humans' route adjustments have proven most efficient." "Efficiency isn't everything," Naslakari cautioned, settling her exoskeleton into the command chair. "Safety margins are fully maintained," Maya interrupted, anticipating the concern. "I just found a current in the gravimetric field that gives us a bit more push." The captain's third eye blinked acknowledgement. This was the paradox of humans. They pushed boundaries, but somehow did so while maintaining a margin of safety that was uniquely their own. Not standardized, not codified in regulations, but effective nonetheless. Alarm chimes disrupted the calm of the command deck. "Anomalous energy readings, bearing 047 Mark 32, reported Neri, the navigator. "I've never seen a signature like this." "On screen," ordered the captain. The forward display shimmered, revealing a swirling distortion in the fabric of space. Purple-tinged lightning crackled along its edges, expanding outward in concentric rings. "Quantum fluctuation storm," Maya breathed, leaning forward. "I've read about these, but they're supposedly theoretical." Dr. Kelvinix had rushed to the command deck at the alarms. His sensory appendages waved in agitation. "If that is indeed what the ancient texts describe, we must alter course immediately. Such phenomena consume matter and energy alike." "Plotting evasive course," Neri confirmed, her translucent tendrils working the navigation controls. Too late. A pulse of energy erupted from the storm, washing over the ship in a cascade of exotic particles. Systems flickered. Gravity briefly reversed, sending unsecured objects flying toward the ceiling before normalizing. "Status," barked Naslakari. "Drive systems compromised," reported the engineering officer. "Coolant leak in the primary matrix. Containment fields at 60% and falling." The implications were immediately clear to everyone on the command deck. Without the containment fields, the quantum drive would destabilize, converting the ship and everything within 1,000 kilometers into constituent atoms. "Time to critical failure?" the captain asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her 3 hearts. 17 minutes, came the grim reply. "Evacuate the engineering section and seal it," Naslakari ordered. "Prepare emergency protocols." "That won't work," Maya interjected, her face showing an expression the translator struggled to identify. "The coolant system needs manual adjustment to maintain integrity while the backups engage." "Impossible," the engineering officer countered. "The radiation levels in the chamber are already at lethal levels for any species." Maya was already moving toward the lift. "Not for a human. At least, not immediately." "Kagzetal blocked your path. Specialist Chen, even your remarkable physiology cannot withstand direct exposure to quantum radiation." "I don't need to survive indefinitely," Maya replied calmly. "Just long enough to stabilize the system." Captain Naslakari rose from her command chair. "I cannot authorize a suicide mission." Maya's expression softened. "It's not suicide, Captain. It's calculated risk. Humans are good at those." She gestured to the display showing the fluctuating containment field. "If that fails, we all die. If I go in, maybe we all live. Including me. The radiation will cause catastrophic cellular damage," Dr. Kelvinix protested. "Then you better have the regeneration chamber ready when I get back." Maya replied with that unnerving human expression, a smile in the face of death. Before further objections could be raised, she entered the lift. The command crew watched in stunned silence as security feeds showed her progress toward the engineering section. She moved with purpose, collecting protective gear that everyone knew would be woefully inadequate against what awaited her. At the sealed door to the drive chamber, she paused. The external sensors showed radiation levels that caused the measurement systems to glitch. "Maya." The captain's voice came through the comm. "This is beyond duty." "With respect, Captain," Maya responded. "This is exactly what you hired me for." She keyed the override sequence. "I'm going in. Keep the doctor standing by." The door slid open, releasing a visible wave of energy that distorted the camera feed. Maya stepped inside, her movements already slowing as the radiation assaulted her cells. The command deck watched in horror and hope as she staggered to the control panel. Her hands, visibly reddening even through the protective gloves, worked the manual override systems. Twice she collapsed, only to drag herself upright again. "Containment fields stabilizing," reported the engineering officer, disbelief evident in his harmonics. "How is she still functioning?" "Because she's human," Xitol replied softly. "They evolved to continue fighting long after any rational species would surrender." Minutes stretched like eternities. The readouts gradually shifted from critical to marginal. The backup systems engage, rerouting coolant through secondary channels. "Crisis mitigated," the engineering officer announced. "Primary containment restored." "Get her out of there," Nas Lakari ordered. The security feed showed Maya crawling toward the exit, leaving a trail of bodily fluid, what humans called blood, on the deck plates. She made it through the door before finally losing consciousness. Dr. Kelvinix worked frantically in the medical bay, utilizing every regenerative technology available. The entire crew cycled through, watching the still form suspended in the healing chamber. "Will she survive?" the captain asked after 3 days of uncertainty. "By all rights, no," the doctor replied. The radiation exposure exceeded survivable limits for any known species, but his appendages gestured helplessly. "She continues to live. Her cells are regenerating in patterns I cannot explain. It's as if her body simply refuses to accept that it should be dead." On the 5th day, Maya's eyes opened. By the 8th, she was sitting up, her skin raw and new but functional. By the 15th, she returned to limited duty, against Dr. Kelvinix's strenuous objections. "How?" Neri asked during the meal period, voice barely above a whisper. "How did you survive?" Maya considered the question. "Earth has radiation too. Not like that, but enough that our bodies develop repair mechanisms. Plus," she added with a weak smile, "humans are stubborn. We don't die easily." Later, in her private quarters, Captain Naslakari recorded her observations for the shipping guild. The value of human crew members extends beyond their physical resilience, though that alone would justify their inclusion. Their true worth lies in their cognitive framework, a perspective shaped by evolving on a world that required constant adaptation and risk assessment. Humans instinctively understand a fundamental truth that many spacefaring species struggle to grasp. The universe is inherently dangerous, and survival often requires calculated risk. They do not freeze in crisis but accelerate, their minds seemingly designed to function optimally under conditions that paralyze other species. They are terrifying because they are alien to our experiences, creatures who walk casually into situations that would break others, who laugh at dangers that would leave us catatonic, who seem almost comfortable with the very idea of their own mortality. And they are invaluable for precisely the same reasons. Every space captain fears having a human aboard because they are constant reminders of how fragile our existence truly is. Every space captain wants a human aboard because when that fragility is exposed, there is no species better equipped to mend it. Word of the distant current's miraculous survival spread rapidly through shipping channels. Within a standard month, human recruitment had increased by 400%. Within a year, regulations were amended to create specialized human response teams for crisis situations. When the distant current docked at Central Hub after completing its delivery, 3 more captain owners approached with offers for Maya's contract, this time at 5 times the standard rate. Naslakari didn't bother responding. Instead, she presented Maya with a new contract, promoting her to first specialist with a corresponding increase in compensation. You could earn more elsewhere, the captain noted as Maya reviewed the terms. The human shrugged. Probably. But you took a chance on me when many wouldn't. Besides, she added with that unsettling smile, I've grown fond of this crew. Even Cetal, who still flinches when I sneeze. As they prepared for departure on their next run, a newly commissioned vessel docked nearby. The UES Resilience, crewed entirely by humans. The various species on the station observation deck watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Are they mad? Whispered a Flotian dock worker. An entire ship of those creatures. Perhaps, replied his supervisor. Or perhaps they understand something we are only beginning to learn. What's that? The supervisor gestured toward the stars visible through the viewport. That the void between worlds demands more than careful protocols and defensive technologies. It demands beings willing to stare into its abyss without flinching, and occasionally, to leap into it with nothing but courage and improvisation. The human ship departed, accelerating with what many species would consider reckless velocity. But the station's tracking systems registered optimal efficiency in their drive signature. Terrifying, yet somehow reassuring, much like humans themselves.